a behind the scenes reel.
I
Behind the
know.
scenes at Coffee with Rich in the green room with Coffee with Rich.
I know. We could sell that to our Patreon members, which we don't have any.
Ah,
I never thought about doing that. Good morning and welcome to Coffee with Rich and Dr. Fuller. Got a good show for you today. Today is my baby brother's birthday. Happy birthday, Jeff Brown.
what is he, like 42 now, 41? Youthful
Uh,
young stud that he is.
He's a spry 53-year-old today.
You know, I'm sure he's feeling old, but I'll tell you, if you're watching this, Mr. Brown, someday you'd pay money to be 53 again.
I know. If only I could go back to those
halcyon days of yesteryear.
Yeah, the halcyon days of when I was 53.
My back didn't hurt as much.
Yeah. So yeah, Jeff, he texted me a second ago and said, like, I don't see you yet. Come on, where are you at? So Jeff, if you're on, happy birthday, pal.
My, you know, as you know, Rich, I lost my mother when I was 10, and she has had two sisters, one of whom, the elder of two, it's turning 80 today. So my Aunt Sharon out there in sunny Oregon. Happy birthday.
What part of Oregon?
You know what? I don't know. Somewhere. I mean, I have the town and everything. I think it's within an hour of Portland.
Does anybody live in Eastern Oregon?
Apparently people do, but
really?
You know, I think it's like a lot of these more rural states that when the urban centers go far left, that they get kind of left behind. And I think that might be the case with Oregon, is like it is with Washington. You know, the urban center, they wherever they go politically, they drag the whole state. But there's some beautiful countryside up. I don't know how much time you spent in Oregon, but
just we did. Mike and I did some training with the Portland PD years before the Summer of Love.
Yeah. Well, being from California, obviously, I've been up there quite a bit. Ashland's beautiful. They have a great Shakespeare festival. If that's your gig, I've enjoyed that several times. But Ashland's closer to the California border. But yeah, you get out on the eastern side of the state, and it's gorgeous. It's just beautiful countryside.
I've flown over it a few times. It's beautiful. Got Alan Kelly. He says, good morning from occupied Virginia. His coin number 1571. If someone is sharing this with you or you find it in some yesteryear, please check out AmericanWarriorSociety.com if you want to become a member of our self-preservation community in these very unprecedented, very unique times that we live in. Alan Kelly says, yes, that's why I live in occupied Virginia. Will Rose says, good morning, Rich and Dr. Fuller. Jeff says, love you all. We'll love you, buddy. Happy birthday. We were just talking about you.
You know, Alan Kelly is an example, too. He lives out in the western part of the state, as I understand it, and that's a fairly conservative section of the country. A lot of beautiful horse farms, everything. But, you know, the Nova area, the section of the state around D.C. has just drugged the state so far to the left that leaves guys like him out in the cold politically.
Yeah, 100%. Scott is on. He is coin number 2489. Let's get some plugs out of the way. I want to plug Dr. Fuller's amazing books, Empathy for the Devil, No Safe Alternative, and Painting Over Rust. You can pick those up anywhere you buy books, as well as go to, what is your website again, Dr. Fuller?
www.tcfuller.com. I'm very creative like that.
Yes, you are.
But I also have the horusgroup.org, which is my consulting company. So if you are in the market for security consulting, policy rewrites, executive protection work, bespoke private firearms training, we got it.
There you go. Good. Now we got that out of the way. We paid the bills, Dr. Fuller.
Woohoo!
I have so many things I want to talk to you about this morning, and these are in no particular order. But before I get to Iran and some of the other things that really interest me and what Cash is doing or not doing, the Obamas. Divorce rumors true, yes or no? And what could that mean long-term if you have a very powerful Democratic couple like that? Seriously, would the money dry up? Will that turn donors off? What are your thoughts?
I don't think it'll have much of an impact on the Democratic Party, right? A monolith like that isn't going to be held hostage by one, powerful political couple. I think the tell-all books that will inevitably come out of it might be interesting, if they're truthful. my first read on stuff like this is the same as my first read on Hollywood, love stories and breakups and whatnot. Is how much of this is true, how much of it is, gee, we haven't been in the news for a while, let's raise our profile. Because if it isn't true, then they can come back and say they have a whole story they can tell about, well, we struggled and we came close, but we pulled it out through the help of our jobs, family, God, whatever it is that they want to push. So that's it's kind of cynical, I know, but that's sort of my initial reaction to that sort of thing. And if somebody files, well, I guess that's a different story.
Yeah. Dr. Gordon Botson is on. Please like and hit that share button. Ted Leonard is on, says he's coin number 1461. Thanks for the insights. Yeah, I know that she's got a highly anticipated podcast, and it is bombing in the ratings, I guess. It's getting his ass kicked. And part of that has to do with, if you haven't seen hairstyle that she debuted on her podcast, I highly encourage you. It is humorous in the extreme. I don't know what look she was going for. Fire your stylist, Michelle. You can do better. What do you think about this revoking the security clearances? It seems like every single day we hear another round of security clearances getting yanked. I believe Hillary Clinton's got yanked, Blinken, and a whole host of other last term groups. Where does it, again, like you've talked about a lot of times, this is precedent setting. What's going to happen?
Oh, I think people are going to be pissed off, but at the end of the day, they're not going to starve. None of these people are going to starve. It is absolutely sort of a right-wing virtue signal. It's a vengeance thing, right? There's some revenge in there. I think that's going to be the new norm. I think he's going to lose his security clearance the second a Democrat gets in office again. I think this is getting. I'm concerned about the precedents. To your point earlier, it's getting a little bit far-reaching, and I know that he campaigned on this. I know that a lot of his minions campaigned on it as well. That hey, these people need to lose their security clearances, and for the people who've actually honestly abused those clearances, okay, great, and you know what, prosecute them if you really think that's what's happened. Prosecute them, drag them into court, go through the process. When you just yank their security clearances and nothing else happens after that, then to me it smacks of just revenge. And of course, the left will label it as being petty. But I think the left will also adopt that. That's a tool that's going to go right into their toolbox as well. So get used to it. If you're a serving member that intends to sell that security clearance when you get out, you better hope that the next president is is in your corner. If it's not, you're going to lose that clearance.
Will Parker is on. It says viewing from SoCal. Make sure you delouse when you leave. Johnny King is on. This is one from gentleman from Kentucky. The whole clearances thing. I want to say, and if somebody could do a little bit of Google foo while we're on, did Biden pull Trump's in 2021? And I want to think he did. I could be mistaken, and pulled his daily briefings. I know that was one of the first things President Trump did. He stopped Biden from receiving daily briefings.
It's funny because I don't think that Biden was going to be able to do anything with that information. My concern would have been who else is in the room when he's getting that briefing, right?
Yeah.
If you're giving him a daily presidential briefing, then who else is hearing it? So because he's clearly not, capable of doing anything with that information. That doesn't do him any good to have that information. It's just you want to be on the inside at this point.
Again, if you believe the things that seem to be out there with regard to Hunter's laptop and things of this nature, which seem to be relatively undisputable at this point, then it is marketable information.
Right. But again, Biden is not going to market it, is my point.
No.
He's not going to do it. But who else is in the room when he gets that briefing? They may very well.
Precisely. Yes.
So I can understand saying it. But, in which case you market it by saying, I'm pulling President Biden's daily briefing because of his condition. I mean, and let's face it, his own defense team and the court said, hey, we're not going to prosecute this guy because he's not mentally competent enough to stand trial. To me, that's a good argument to not give him classified information at all.
100%.
Yeah, he's not in a position to need it. He can't use it for anything. Why there's a need to know issue here. There's a, generally you've been in classified programs, even if you have the clearance and you are in a position to have access to the information, you don't necessarily get the information if you don't actually need the information.
Right. Yeah, just because you have a TSSCI or Q clearance doesn't mean that there's openly having conversations about special access programs around. That's why they're called special access programs.
Right. I mean, they couldn't read me out of those programs fast enough as far as I was concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was read in for certain parts of my career. And, that's when you start getting into the TSSCI and then the little subsets underneath it, have all their little code names. That's a pretty lengthy process. When I was getting ready to go to Gitmo, it was a couple of days sitting in a small room and just getting read into this. And it's all basically, look, you screw this up, you're going to prison. You screw this up, we're suing you until your children will be paying the debt. So I was like, hey, get me out of this as fast as I can, right? I mean, okay, I need it. When I'm done needing it, get me out.
Yeah.
So, and to Alan Kelly's question here, do they really need security clearances after they are out of office or no longer in the administration? Need is the operative word there. And I would say no. But a lot of them, what will happen is, especially the younger ones, obviously it doesn't apply in President Biden's case, they'll leave government service and then step into the private sector with, say a defense contractor. And that clearance that they have is expensive to get, right? The government pays for it because there's an extensive background process, not just a running you through NCIC, but people are knocking on doors. I've done a million of them where you go out and you do a neighborhood canvas on every place they've ever lived. You talk to all the people that they put down as recommendations, and each one of those people you ask for other recommendations that might know. If I'm doing Rich Brown, he says, yeah, talk to Jeff Brown. Okay, I knock on Jeff Brown's door. I talk to him all about Rich. And then I say, hey, do you know anyone else that knows Rich real well? Oh, yeah, there's, Alan Kelly and there's, TC Fuller. And then we write all those down and then we send people out for that. So it takes a long time to get all that. So there's an expense involved that if you have that clearance and then you go to Grumman or you go to Lockheed Martin or you go to someone else, it saves them that expense. You're already a vetted source. You can step into roles more easily, and then you can go into these meetings with the government and discuss classified operations, classified materiel needs, classified purchases without having to wait 6 months or a year while a private background check is done on you. So that's why people want to keep those clearances. So in the case of former presidents, some of them like Bill Clinton, for example, President Obama, they will then make money off of it as well. But in the case of President Biden, I think it's a courtesy, right? You were in the club. You're one of the 45 guys that have done this. So you get to hear, the secrets of the realm in general terms. Mm-hmm. And, it's just treating your predecessor kindly so that the next guy treats you kindly is really what it boils down to. But a need, no.
Yeah. And Ted says that they did strip Trump, and I thought I'd read that. So that's just this quid pro quo at this point, I would imagine. And it's going to be, like you said, Dr. Fuller, standard operating procedure moving forward.
Right. And how many people did Biden strip of their security clearances? A few. I promise you, without looking at the numbers, I promise you that President Trump has stripped more. Mm-hmm. And I promise you that the next guy will strip more than President Trump. It's just this pendulum keeps swinging left, right, left. And that's why you keep hearing me harp on the show about I'd really like to see this administration ratchet it back a little bit, because every bullet they're putting in a gun is going to be a bullet in the gun for the next guy. And the next guy is just going to get another gun and load it with the same bullets and then turn around and say, well, I know you don't like it here on the right, but this is a precedent set by President Trump. He clearly saw the need for these sort of behaviors, and this is what we're going to do. We are inspired by him and his behavior, and we're going to go forward and do what we think needs to be done in order to ensure the safety and security of the American public.
Yeah, absolutely. Rudy is on. Good morning, Rudy. Ted says the intelligence types who entered the political hotbed issues was not supposed to happen. They brought it upon themselves. Well, and that's I think Ted is referring to the 50 intelligence officials who said that Hunter Biden's laptop was nothing more than Russian disinformation or some version of that in their letter. And of course, none of them came out and said, oh, my bad. Yeah, no, not a single one. So that's all the more reason to strip them. But I
And,
think you're right. Think about this. The long-term consequences of this is what? Well, then you're going to have people that will not want to relinquish power because they realize if everyone ratchets it up a notch, where does this go? Like, I can't afford to leave power because they're gonna really go after me, my family, etc.
right. And you'll have others that it'll be a bar to entry, right? I mean, look at politics now. I think you'd be great in your city council, maybe even at state government, Rich, but there's no way that you would do it, right? Because you're not going to put your family through it. I wouldn't do it for the same reason. Look, 6 years in Congress and you get lifetime retirement. You get colossal benefits for the rest of your life. Nobody comes out of Congress broke. Okay. They just don't, right or left. They all come out wealthy. So why would you not want to get into it? Well, the reason I don't want to get into it is because I just don't want to. It's a knife fight in a phone booth, and I don't want to be involved.
I think you're a principled man as well. I don't see you going down some of those dark. And that's not to cut you off, but that was it's so disheartening to see Dan Crenshaw. He's former Navy SEAL. Is now a multi-millionaire. How the hell did that happen? And it's like, hey, a guy can't make a couple of bucks on the stock market, like not at the expense of your fellow Americans.
Yeah, and I've never seen anybody in Congress with an endorsement deal, right? And I've seen him doing some holster endorsements, and I'm like, well, I don't know if it's illegal. I can't imagine it is, but it's odd to me. It's just weird. And again, I'm not passing judgment here. Just to my ear. To my eye, it looks strange. But I mean, you see some of the interviews with Crenshaw, and I happen to like his position on a lot of things.
I do
but
too.
then I see his vehement defense of what amounts to insider trading by members of Congress. I mean, he is staunchly opposed to any regulation of that, and that tells us what we need to know. Right? I mean, there's a reason that people go into politics, and sadly it's no longer altruism. It's no longer a loyalty to the body politic and to trying to make the government serve the people. It's personal.
I refuse to believe that it was ever that way. I mean, I just, maybe I'm too cynical. I don't think it was ever that way.
Well, maybe power attracts, right? There's a certain personality type that is attracted to power. I mean, and you've read my book, Painting Over Rust. I talk about it in the FBI, right? The people that are attracted to management in the FBI are attracted for a lot of the wrong reasons. Yeah. And that's a systemic problem. That really is a systemic problem. People are going to play the cards you deal them, pure and simple. So people get into Congress and they play the cards they're dealt. And until you change the system and you make the system less monetarily motivating, you're going to get the kind of people that you get in our Congress.
Yeah, systems with high, low risk, high reward. It's just going to embolden people like that. Don't have the ethical breaks to say this is probably wrong. This doesn't seem right for me to take this endorsement deal or make this trade. And until we have another kind of ab scam where they cart a bunch of politicians off in handcuffs, it's not going to end.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, the people that are left standing after Abscam, for example, for those that aren't of a certain age, don't have enough gray in their hair, Abscam was a sting operation that the FBI ran and caught a whole bunch of members of Congress, both congressmen and senators, taking bribes, hand-to-hand cash bribes on video, on audio. It was pretty ugly. But some of the folks that were around then that got singed by that investigation but didn't get hammered by that investigation carried a grudge forever. Like Pat Leahy is an excellent example. He was right on the fringe of that and almost got dragged off in handcuffs, but didn't. Right, so he didn't quite cross the line for prosecution, but he knew how close he had come, and he was pissed off at the FBI for the rest of his career. And so who won that, right?
Right. No, I think that kind of cleansing is good. I mean, and that kind of circles us back to what should be going on right now. And I don't know if you saw it, Dr. Fuller, but Cash Patel gave like one of his first interviews with Trey Gowdy. Did you catch that?
I haven't caught that. No.
And I saw it this morning.
Talk
Like I
about a
said,
softball interview, though. I mean,
oh my God, it was terrible.
I didn't even see it, and I can tell you that was a ground ball.
You talk about a waste of 5 minutes and 21 seconds or whatever the length of the thing was. It's like, I'm going to make the priority. Now I'm going to paraphrase it. So those of you, Steve Miller, Will Parker, Donald Green, Ted, and Alan and Jeff, and all the folks watching this one, I'll paraphrase it for you. It's like, under my leadership, the FBI's priority is going to be going after violent criminals. What? Did you read your own book, Government Gangsters? What are we talking about here? I mean, there's a nexus. I get it between what Christy Nome is doing and what you're doing. I understand that. But, brother, that is not what I want you to go after. Thank you to the 18 folks watching us live. What do you say? I know you didn't see it, but just based on that quick soundbite, what do you think?
I can tell you that as soon as we're done here, I'm going to watch it. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
Because, for those that don't know, I worked I won't say I worked with Trey Gowdy. I will say I worked in the same room with Trey Gowdy on occasion when I was up on Capitol Hill. And he is a true believer. He is very much a right-wing conservative, believer. And he was in charge of keeping the Benghazi investigation alive and well during Hillary's run up to the 2016 election, kind of hang that millstone around her neck. He did a hell of a job doing it.
A big fan of Trey Gowdy, by the way. Let's get that out. I don't want you to
fair.
People watching that. Oh, Rich don't like Trey. No, like him.
Yeah. So I've never met Cash Patel, however, but an interview like that is, that's a softball interview. And frankly, this guy, Mr. Patel, doesn't have a lot of experience in front of the camera doing interviews certainly not with a hostile media. Mm-hmm. So this is probably a good, way to cut his teeth in that environment. Nice friendly ground ball, softball questions from a friendly interviewer. But saying things like, I want the FBI to concentrate on violent crime. Okay. He's the director. He can help set the priorities. He's the guy that translates the president's vision into the priorities of the FBI. Fine. From my perspective, I would say a couple of things about that. One, there's a lot of people doing violent crime. A lot of people investigating violent crime. All right. Not just the FBI, not just the 13,000 FBI agents in the country. There are hundreds of thousands of police officers in this country investigating violent crime. There are not as many people in this country investigating high-end white-collar crime. There are not as many people in this country investigating counterintelligence or counterterrorism. Okay. So if you make priority violent crime, then you are putting more people there. You're taking assets away from elsewhere. And that's for the existing numbers. If you're also reducing the numbers, then you're going to see a reduction in force across the board. And if that's your priority, cool. But understand that, for every benefit, there's a cost. And that isn't what he said he was going to do in his books. And this is, we've talked about this on the show, and I don't like saying, look, we told you so. But there's a lack of experience here, and there's a lack of full understanding of what the FBI actually does. And, look, no slide on Mr. Patel. That's true across the country. Right? People around the country just have a vague, at best, idea of what the FBI does. And, part of my reason to always come on your show and talk is to humanize that FBI and kind of put some information out there that gives people a better idea of what they're dealing with. So if he wants to go after violent crime, okay. And look, I've worked violent crime, and it's actually a fun type of crime to investigate because, there's something
morally satisfying, right?
Yeah, there is. There's something viscerally satisfying about grabbing a guy who stuck a gun in a bank teller's face. I'm going to kill everybody in here. Oh, okay. So you're picking on I've never liked bullies. I don't like bullies. That to me is a bullying writ large. You want to fight? Okay, well, you're fighting. You're pointing. Yeah, right. Fight somebody who knows how to fight. Mm-hmm. Fight somebody who's here to fight you. I don't want to fight you. I want to put you in handcuffs and take you to jail. But if you decide to jump ugly, you're not dealing with a bank teller anymore. You're dealing with me and 10 or 15 of my closest friends, and we are ready for that sort of behavior. Mm-hmm. So there's something very satisfying about grabbing that guy. And now he's boohooing and he's tearing up and he's peeing on himself and everything else because he's just scared to death that he's going to get hurt. So those cases are fun, but how impactful are they versus the doctor that bilks Medicaid for, $20 million in a year, which happens. You may not think it does, and that impacts us all financially. But there's secondary and tertiary effects that aren't as obvious to people. This guy's driving up your insurance costs. He's driving up your taxes. So that's, people kind of, that's a lot more amorphous. It's hard to get my arms around. It's not what happened on the TV show I like to watch at night, FBI or Magnum PI or whatever other show you're watching out there. I want gunfights and car races. And for me, Mr. Patel's behavior up to this point has indicated that's kind of the camp he's in. We talked about, for example, his visit recently to HRT. And maybe, I don't know if you've seen the pictures of him in his gray and black urban camouflage ensemble. I'll send those to you later. So one of the first things he posted was pictures of him in this gray and black urban camo with shades and a baseball hat. And he popped up, and there's some stuff in the background, some helicopters and everything else. Well, those of us in the Bureau looked at it and said, "Oh, that's HRT." And then he was in the HRT shoot house, and he's watching them. But he showed up at HRT in a camouflage uniform, which, by the way, he bought from Gucci. It was all, when I say Gucci gear, those of us that have been around, we think of, oh, that's high-end gear. No, this was legitimate, honest to God, not Louis Vuitton, but Gucci urban camouflage. And for a guy like him, in the position he's in, to show up at HRT, which is full of pipe-hitting guys. I mean, there's a bunch of, hard men out there. A lot of them former SEAL team guys, former Special Forces guys, former Delta guys. I mean, when I was in, one of the guys that got shot down in Mogadishu in one of the helicopters was a pilot out at HRT. So, I mean, these are no joke dudes out there. Yeah. And for him to show up dressed like that, it's kind of like, is this cosplay day at HRT?
Yes.
I mean, it was perceived as being incredibly disrespectful. But I don't know that he was intentionally disrespectful. I tend to think it comes back to ignorance. He just doesn't know.
Right.
And that's what we're seeing, I think, a lot with some of his steps so far. I think he's well-intentioned enough. I don't think he's a malicious guy per se. But his well-intentions are aligning with President Trump's vision. And because he doesn't have that depth of knowledge with the organization, he's going to have these missteps, and he's going to make these mistakes. And frankly, putting the deputy director, Mr. Bongino, in there, he's in the same boat, right? He doesn't have the experience either, and people will say, well, he was 12 years in the Secret Service. He was. He did a couple years, I guess, with NYPD, did a couple years as a street agent for Secret Service. And, they work a lot of counterfeiting cases when they're not on protection details. Then he did 5 years at their academy. And then he was on the POTUS detail. So he's very good at posting doors, standing in front of a door, making sure nobody goes across. He's probably very good at actually running a detail where you're creating that bubble, which is a complicated, complex beast, especially when it comes to the President of the United States. But that's not running a 30,000 person organization. And he doesn't have the depth of understanding of the FBI either. And it has a stated, I don't know if hatred is too strong a word, but it's publicly stated dislike for the FBI, disdain for the FBI. And so that he's not able to provide context to Mr. Patel. And they started bringing in some of these whistleblowers that were out there. And one of them, by the way, that showed up at Congress and talked to, he sat right next to me for several years here in Charlotte. Nice guy. I liked him a lot. But none of them have a long time in the FBI either. So it appears from the outside looking in, which is what I'm doing, that he doesn't have the in-depth knowledge necessary. And he's not surrounding himself with the people that have the in-depth knowledge that he can draw from, which is stuff we've talked about on the show before. It was a concern of mine months ago that we've kicked around. And we're starting to see the impact of it vis-a-vis this interview, for example. And you're going to see these kind of missteps and errors. And I wish the guy well. I hope he does well. I really do, because the organization is important to me, and I don't want to see it fail. But I have concerns when I see mistakes like this made, because this isn't grade school t-ball, right?
Right.
This is like watching the New York Yankees make mistakes in the World Series. This is serious business, and this is the kind of serious business where when you screw up, a plane crashes into a building, a bomb goes off, bad people get into bad places and do bad things. And it does affect people like the members of the audience here at American Warrior Society. It affects the average person. And that concerns me. It worries me.
Okay, a lot to unpack there.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Let's see. Don Bothwell is on up there in Montana. Coin number 2270. Pat Cahill says there's a whole bunch of us in state and local politics that are in it to make our communities better. In fact, we're in it because the decisions we make have the greatest impact on our local communities. God bless you, Pat, for what you're doing up there. Mark says, good morning, gentlemen. Pushing through the freezing rain and snow up here in Ontario, Canada. Alan says Mr. Patel has a whole lot to learn, and if he doesn't, he is going to get his nose very bloodied from the right and the left. And Will Parker is saying, talking about the bank robber that sticks his gun. Yeah, you're going to show up with your friends with rifles, and you're going to show him the devastating effects of 77 grain OTM has on flesh. But before I go there, Chesterton's fence, this idea of Chesterton's fence is, you don't tear the fence down until you understand the purpose of the fence. And then once you can tell me the purpose of the fence, now I might let you dismantle a portion or all of it, but only until you can clearly articulate. Now, I say that because that relative to Patel and the FBI and what he ran his mouth about in government gangsters, maybe now he's getting illuminated as to the purpose of some of the things that he said he was going to tear down. And he's like, oh shit, I can't do that. Like you said, now he's seeing the behind the scenes magic. But my concern is, like you said, Dr. Fuller, okay, you're going to go after violent crime. There's a whole lot of other agencies doing that, but you're the director if that's where you want to go. But guys, Iran, China, Russia, my God, our enemies and the brave men and women out there that are doing the hard counterintelligence work. If you're going to pull them off the street to chase violent criminals around the country, that's doing nothing for our domestic terrorist capabilities. I mean, I just don't understand that. And I don't understand, like you said, the white collar criminals, because again, to your point about some local doctor, and no disrespect, Dr. Botton is I'm watching, I'm sure he may have heard of it, but if you're a doctor out there abusing and defrauding Medicaid and Medicare, you go, well, that's a victimless crime. Bullshit. It's a high reward, low stakes, low probability of getting caught because the system is so Byzantine, and who would understand it enough? Well, the FBI has plenty of people that have given the direction that can do forensic accounting and put these scumbags way behind bars. But they can't do that if they're not getting the funding, if they're being reduced, and they're being reassigned to chase violent criminals. Your thoughts?
Well, you hit the nail right on the head, Rich. They're pulling FBI agents now to do things like transporting the illegal aliens that HSI is picking up, because HSI is out there busy. They're doing their thing. And that's cool. The FBI has been directed to assist, and that's come down from on high. So you've got FBI agents basically doing criminal Uber. Okay, if that's what you want to do, but to your point, that takes away valuable resources from other things. So if I, for example, am an agent and I'm transporting a guy 2 hours down the road to wherever he needs to go, and then I've got to drive 2 hours back, well, that's 4 hours that I'm not working on whatever my normal daily job is. And now, roll that out across the country. How many man hours, how many man days, man months are we losing to that process? And look, if that's the decision, that's the decision. Okay, I get it. But at least I think it needs to be discussed. I talked, you mentioned the white collar stuff like I had brought up earlier. I'll give you just one example from my own career. We worked a case one time where there was a dentist that up in Vermont, and he was passing out oxys like candy. So we ended up hitting him, and we go in and we tear the place apart, take all his records and whatnot. But I remember one guy, I'm looking through his records, and he issued a guy 4,000 Oxy 80s in 6 months. 6 months. One person. And so what was actually happening was people on the street found out, hey, we can get oxys from this guy. Oxys being oxycodone, which is an opioid. Very, very valuable on the street. I think at the time, Oxy 80s were going for a couple $100 a pill
Mm-hmm.
on the street. And he just had a line of junkies rolling in complaining about tooth pain. And he would issue, okay, here's 500 pills. And then 3 days later, the guy would show up and say, oh, I was fishing out on Lake Champlain and I dropped him overboard. Oh, okay, we'll have 500 more.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just rolling this out over and over and over and over again. And complaints to the state medical board, oddly enough, prior to us hitting the place, didn't have any impact. They wouldn't pull his license.
Mm.
Well, once we got involved, what happens? Well, one, they pull his license because we arrested him. But the first thing we did is we called DEA and said, hey, because a doctor has to have licensure to hand out certain narcotics, like all narcotics. And the DEA issues and maintains those licenses. A lot of people don't know that. But it's a regulatory function that the DEA performs. So we told them what was going on. They yanked his license that day. And then we hit the place, we arrested him, we took him off. But think about the impact that guy had for the year or two prior to us getting involved that he was doing this. And it was lucrative for him.
How many people died because of that guy?
Right.
I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
What did the Dr. Fuller, like 50, 60,000 Americans die from opioids every single year?
Yeah.
I mean, 54,000 died in Vietnam, man. That's almost like a Vietnam level casualties.
Right.
Americans dying from these people. So, I mean, put them under the jail as far as I'm concerned. And Dr. Watson says, don't worry, those of us with morals hate those guys. I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's
awful. And I remember I have a very good friend of mine, childhood friend of mine that is a MD out in California. Mm. And I talked to him one time about overprescribing and that problem. And it had never been discussed in any of his medical training up that. Really? Overprescribing? So the whole reason, So the whole reason that a lot of these MDs don't overprescribe is their own moral fiber, is their own sense of right and wrong, and their own medical concern. Well, I don't really want to give this guy 100 oxys, but he's in pain, or what I'm going to do to him to fix this issue is going to be painful. So I'm going to give him 25 oxys. I recently had kidney stone issues, and the doctor that I was dealing with said, look, this is going to be very painful. I'm going to give you, and I think he gave me like 50 oxys, a prescription for 50 oxys. And I'm very, very leery about taking meds, right? I'll take them if I need them, but short of needing them, I'm not taking them, if that makes any sense at all. Mm-hmm. But I mean, and this is before I had a whit of pain. And I imagine if I had, put on my Academy Award winning Oscar performance and, the pain, the agony, maybe I get 100, maybe I get 200. So, I get relying on people's integrity and honesty to a degree, but like Reagan said, right? Trust but verify, because not everybody's a good person. Not everybody is motivated by altruism, even MDs. Yeah. See, Dr. Botson says he rarely gives anyone more than 10.
But see, this is the problem. And it's not the problem. I'm glad he's doing that. But I guess where I'm going with this is for those with, like my bride, she's at a follow-up this morning. I should be with her. She's had, 4 back surgeries, lives in constant pain, and she doesn't want to have it, and I don't want her to have it, and so on. But like, even if you have a surgery these days, like, here's some Tylenol, because they don't want to get you started down that opioid path, and for good reason. Some people will run away with it. My sister was one, and it took her life. So it's something that's very near and dear to me. And it's something that we're saying all this, the 18 folks watching us, we went down a side path. But the reason we're saying this is the director of the FBI has chosen to make violent criminals. It sounds good that I'm going to make violent criminals to take them off the street. Okay, great. And I understand. I think it was Don Bothwell's point about it doesn't make sexy photo ops when you show a couple of nerdy accountants in handcuffs. It looks really cool when you got guns and explosives and, drugs and stuff like that. And a violent scumbag felon with tattoos on his neck, that makes a great photo op. Not a couple of doctors let off in handcuffs. Yeah. But that's what we need. And then Don also says the embedded terror cells that analysts say are already in our country need to be a priority, in his opinion. I think we would all agree with that.
Sure. But of course, like so many bureaucracies, what we're going to see is they'll slip in priority until they blow something else. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Mr. Hamilton says they hit a couple of doctors up there who are pushing out 2,000 to 3,000 pills a week. It's lucrative. I mean, that's why people do it. It pays money. And by the way, if you're an MD and you're pushing, Rich Brown's oxycodone from, Pfizer or wherever Rich Brown is from, not only are you getting paid by the purchaser, but you're getting kickbacks from these pharmaceutical companies, right? They are incentivizing you to push their meds.
I wasn't going to talk about it, but I might as well. I don't know if sometimes he watches the show, sometimes he doesn't. When I first retired from the Marine Corps, there was a buddy of mine that showed up at the house and says, "Hey, I've got this great business idea. I would like for you to help me. And we're going to set up these companies in the state of Florida because Florida has lax laws regarding this thing. And we're going to set up companies, and then we'll go and sell doctors on buying shares in these companies." And what it is like, say Johnny the podiatrist, and we'll go golfing with him, and we'll sell him on the idea of buying shares in this, company, Halcyon Limited. Well, Halcyon Limited only buys the drugs, buys shares in the drugs that he provides. He can't do it legally, but we can, and he's just buying shares in this other thing. And I'm sitting there and over coffee at my house, and I'm like,
doesn't pass
God, we're just printing money down in Florida. I'm like, I don't give a shit. My ethics says that this is probably not something I want to be involved in. Dr. Watson says that is false. It is illegal for us to take any kind of kickback. Yeah, absolutely. But this is the workaround, Dr. Fuller. And that is, and they sold it to me as, look, this doctor believes in this medication. Let's say I go back to the podiatrist. He believes in this product. He knows it works. So it's a good thing, right? He's going to prescribe it anyway. Why shouldn't he have shares in Halcyon Limited? And Halcyon Limited, all it does is buys and trades shares of the things that he's going to do anyway. And we get all the podiatrists in on it. And it's a great thing. And then we set up this other shell company. And I'm like, that makes me sick. I won't be a part of it.
No, and I absolutely understand that. And, you like to think we can self-regulate and we can, rely on people's honesty. Truth of the matter is you can't always. And I'm happy that Dr. Botson's straightened us out on that point because I was misinformed. So,
but as he says, there are workarounds.
Yeah, there are. People are creative when it comes to making money. They're very creative. And if I've got a product that does X and you've got a product that does X, and we're competing companies, and we both go to Dr. Botson and say, "Hey, when you have a choice, prescribe my drug, Fuller's drug, because it does X." Mm-hmm. And you're going to have a pharmaceutical rep that shows up and says, no, prescribe Brown's product that does X. Or I'm going to go talk to the pharmacist and let them know, hey, when this comes in, this is what you should have on your shelf to push. How do those doctors and pharmacists make decisions? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's a reason to it. But again, to the earlier point that got us on this topic, it gets very, very complicated very, very fast. And there's, like you said, Byzantine rules and regulations and ways around things and how we can do it. And it takes a certain degree of specialized knowledge, and it takes a lot of time to investigate this sort of thing. And not all PDs and not all state police organizations have the time and the money to do it because their priority is, picking up the violent criminal.
They don't have the specialization to do it. My God, man. You know how many accountants were on my police force? 0. Nobody, that couldn't look into it. We need the Bureau's specialty.
Right. I was in a 6-man office in northern Vermont, and we had 2 accountants out of 6 guys, 2 CPAs, and 2 CPAs and another guy with accounting background, right? He wasn't a CPA, but he had an accounting background. Mm-hmm. So, could those guys go out and investigate violent crime? Sure. Yeah, they did. 2 of those 3 were on SWAT. One was the SWAT team leader. Is that, the priority that necessarily gets addressed to the detriment of other investigations? Mm-hmm. I don't know. We used to do a thing where we would do a crime survey. So the FBI every couple of years would send everybody out in the whole bureau. We have agents all over the country, and they would take these forms out to these different PDs in their footprint. Mm-hmm. So like for my office, it was Northern Vermont. And we go out to the PDs, and you're supposed to have connections with all these departments, and you talk to them and fill out this form. You say, hey, what are the actual crime problems you are seeing here in Montpelier, Vermont, right? Population 15,000 or whatever it was. What are you seeing at the PD level? Because what you see at 2 a.m. working a PD pushing a cruiser is something I'm not going to see, because I'm a Fed and I'm not going to be out there at 2 a.m. because frankly my pillow is much too comfortable. But we would get information like that from each of these little PDs, and then we would create a gestalt, a mosaic, and send that up to Albany headquarters. And then Albany, as a result, would get a crime survey picture, a snapshot of what the crime trends were around their entire division area, and what, by inference, what the concerns were for these local police departments. And then we would set priorities within the FBI based on these crime surveys. So it wasn't a matter of, well, we think this is going on as dictated by somebody in Washington, D.C. It was, we know this is what is going on. Because let's face it, the crime problem in Miami-Dade is different than the crime problem on Potato Farm Road in Crossville, Tennessee. It just is. And to ignore that is, I think, a formula for the misapplication of limited assets.
Spot on. Don says not all the crimes are local these days. Many, except for crimes of passion, cross state lines that muddies jurisdictional authority and facilitates the need for multi-jurisdictional agencies, hence the FBI or Marshal Service. 100%. Johnny King says arresting the corporations and bigwigs that are responsible for creating the drug issues is akin to cutting the head off the snake, cripple the logistics of abuse, and it will wither away. Man, I love that. Absolutely.
But of course, who's easier to grab? The dealer doing hand-to-hand deals on a corner, or the guy protected by multiple layers of corporate, firewalls? And to Don Bothwell's point, it doesn't just stop at interstate; it's international. Most of the embassies of the United States in foreign countries have what we call a legal attaché, which is an FBI agent assigned to that office. Now, the bigger places, we have more agents. So like in London, I think we have 3. In Belgium, we have 1. But the whole idea behind that is to liaise with the locals and help us fight these fights before they cross our borders, right? To facilitate information transfer. Because again, use your local PD, use Nashville PD. It's a big PD. Do they have the bodies to put somebody in Singapore full time, and a body to put in Belgium and Canberra and Kenya? I would say probably not. And that's a tough sell to go to the Nashville City Council and say, hey, look, we've had some fentanyl coming up from Mexico. We'd like to put one of our detectives down in Mexico City for the next 5 years full time. Oh, he's going to need language training, and he's going to need per diem. He's going to need a house. He's going to need a car. That's a tough sell to the Nashville City Council. I mean, it's really hard. They're saying, hey, look, we got gang violence just 2 blocks from here. How about you go arrest those guys?
Right.
But they're fentanyl gangs. We should push this back and fight the fentanyl in Mexico City. And it's just not going to fly.
But many Americans may be shocked to learn that since 9/11, maybe predating 9/11, NYPD does have intelligence agents in Paris, London, Jerusalem, all around the world, and I'm sure they're liaising with those agencies to know what threats are coming to their city.
Sure.
Of course,
That's a 40,000 person PD.
That's what I was going to say. Nashville is not New York City, obviously.
Right. And I mean, after 9/11, nobody was going to tell NYPD no to anything.
No.
Right? Because all they had to do was say, look, we depended on you to protect our city, and you failed.
Correct.
It was an intelligence failure, period. I mean, there was a guy that was on my flight to Guantanamo Bay that was an NYPD officer.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, he was going down there to interview a particular person about a particular thing.
Wow.
So, yeah, they're all over the place.
Before I close this loop on the FBI, I want to circle back one more time to Chesterton's fence, and that is to say, let's say that okay, I'm not going to let you touch this fence until you can tell me clearly what the mission of this fence is. Okay, and let's say the mission of the fence is to protect the status quo and to keep the grift going from members of Congress. Then I'm going to say tear the damn fence down. Now, and that's my concern. I wanted him to go in and do the things he said he was going to do, but I don't know if he drank the Kool-Aid, if he's been replaced by a robot. I don't know what happened, but what I heard on the Trey Dowdy interview just completely took the wind out of my sails, and I am very, very disheartened to see it. I've clutched my pearls ever since I saw it. Let's just be honest.
And look, I completely understand that, and I'm not at a place where I want to attribute malfeasance or criminal intent or anything evil at all to Mr. Patel at this point. I kind of default to ignorance, and not an insulting way to say that. It's just he just doesn't know, and he's not surrounded by people who can tell him. And it's a complicated beast that he's running right now. Just keeping that place running with the lights on is hard enough. And recall, if you will, that they decapitated that organization. The day President Trump took over, you lost the director, you lost the deputy director, and within a week, you lost all 7 EADs. So you lost the top 3 levels of the FBI in a week. Gone. Just out the door. That alone, I mean, if this was a war and the Chinese did that to us, we'd be shooting at them. Right?
Oh my God, yeah.
There'd be gunplay involved. Just coming back from that, just reestablishing the chain of command from that is hard enough. It's no different than if you were running a battalion of infantry in combat and you lost the battalion commander, the sergeant major, the XO, the entire staff, all in one artillery strike. You can keep going, but you're still in combat, and you've got to replace those people like right now, because you still got to fight the fight. Forget the changes that you want to make. Let's say you want to make the changes and you want to change your battalion's direction from north to south. That is a complicated beast under the best of circumstances with an experienced staff. Well, now your staff's gone. Your command elements are all gone, and they're all new to the job. I mean, you were a platoon gunny. You know what it's like when a new platoon leader shows up. There's a 6-month training period just to get the guy to keep from, stubbing his toe every time he gets up in the morning. I mean, it's a true story, right?
No, you're right. You're right.
And it's a true story when you're the new platoon gunny, right? When you show up in the new platoon, yes, you know a lot. But you don't know a lot about this particular place. And maybe they're doing some things right. Maybe they're doing some things wrong.
And you got to have the maturity to know what you don't know and be willing to learn. And if you're not,
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to do.
Yeah, it is. And Mark says if we become the 51st state, we would only need 1 agent up here instead of 1 per province. Hey, and I'm so glad you said that, because Mark, that's a perfect setup for my next point I want to talk to Dr. Fuller about. And that is, let's talk Panama, let's talk Greenland, let's talk Canada.
Okay.
Start wherever you like, Dr. Fuller.
Hey, look, first I'm going to start out with, I love the Canadians. I always had a great time. The folks in Quebec could be a little annoying because they're very French, and they would take that Frenchness very seriously. But I always had a great time with the Canadians. I had a great time when I served with them overseas, with their military personnel. So Canada becoming part of the United States, I think would be awesome. I think that would be much easier said than done. We could probably integrate Western Canada a lot easier than again, Quebec.
A lot of cowboys out there.
A lot of cowboys. Well, there's not a lot of people out there, but the people that are there are, they're our kind of people.
They're just like everybody in Wyoming and Montana. Right. And
it's just like all of a sudden Montana got huge. And British Columbia is a lot of fun. I love Vancouver. It's a great place. Panama is such a Mark Hamilton. So do I. Panama is such a strategic animal that would be, I think, a much different animal, because I think there'd be a lot of stakeholders on us absorbing Panama into the United States. That it's one thing that Panama is a client state, it's an ally of the United States. A whole other story if it's an actual state. Because,
what currency does Panama use, Dr. Fuller?
I think it uses the American dollar.
Yes, it does.
So it's a state in all but name. I get it, but it's much easier for the Chinese to deal with shipping stuff through a sovereign nation than it is to ship it through the United States. And it would be such a strategic stranglehold on Panama. And look, it's like the Egyptians owning the Suez Canal. Mark Hamilton's killing me with his comments.
I tell you, before we leave Canada, man, he's right. If you look at what their exports are to the United States, the tariffs could literally bankrupt that country. It could shut them down big time.
Yeah, I've had conversations about that here in my house as well. Is like, look, it will hurt doing that to Canada, and Canada it's such a close neighbor and friend of the United States. The idea of being in something called a trade war with the Canadians, it's upsetting on a visceral level. But yeah, Canadian trade war would hurt the United States, but it would ruin their already teetering economy. So, I would like to see that avoided if we could.
And another far left, Carney coming in. It's like you're Trudeau light or maybe Trudeau heavy, depending on his policies.
And it drags them closer and closer to the Chinese. It's dragging them closer to the Russians. And that's something we can't abide. It's the longest undefended border in the world. And, do we really want to see a wall go up all the way across Montana? I don't. I mean, you forget the logistics, just the optics, right? I think Greenland would be a great purchase, personally.
But can we go back? So I'm sorry. Let's go back to Panama, Dr. Fuller, before we leave.
I'm jumping all over the place. Catch up.
I know. No, I allowed that to happen. I said take it where you want, but Panama's interesting. I heard some things over the weekend that I really need to dig into regarding BlackRock and some other companies that Trump is allowing to do some things down there that are very, very interesting. Like if China controls ports on both sides, then don't they control access? They can say, I don't know the Panama Canal, but you own the ports. Right. You control the entrance and exit. So yes, you do. And you could shut us out. So now what does taking back the Panama Canal look like? I mean, is it kinetic? Is it?
Jeez, I hope not.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if we decided to invade Panama,
again,
that's not a fight, right? I mean, we saw what happened the last time. The Powell Doctrine at play, right? If 5,000 people are enough, then let's drop 30,000, and we can't. So I don't think anybody's debating our ability to take Panama. And let's face it, in the last 150 years, the United States invaded just about every country in Central America at one time or another. I mean, the Marines just got tired of invading places down in the Central America and the Caribbean, and it just got exhausting after a while. So it can be done.
Mostly over bananas, oddly enough.
Which is weird, right? Well, it's money. This is what it boils down to.
Not jokes, folks. Look it up. Banana wars was a real thing.
Yeah, and it's the same now, right? If we take Panama by force now, it's because of money. Not bananas this time, but money. So I don't think we want to be that country, right? Because what's the difference between us and the USSR at that point, right? Oh, Hungary wants to be free, roll tanks. Invading Canada. I'm starting to think Mr. Hamilton wants us to roll north. And
I think a lot of Canadians wouldn't mind that. I mean, of course, there's some that obviously don't want to lose their autonomy and sovereignty, and I completely understand that. There would be a whole lot of good things coming their way if they were. I just don't ever see that happening.
Yeah. Well, and 50% of their population lives south of Detroit, right? I mean,
ain't that weird?
Yeah, it's so bizarre.
Listen to what he just said. 50% lives south of Detroit, and that little tiny sliver down there. Yeah. And then if you ratchet that up just a few miles, you get 70%. I mean, And I think the majority of them are all in traffic around Toronto every time we go. Good Lord, that place. But taking Panama by force, I think we should maybe avoid if we can. I mean, I really see no imperative to invading Panama. What about the Monroe Doctrine?
Well, yeah, okay, but at what point do we hang that up, right? I mean, it's been around a long time, and this is not the United States of the expansionist periods in the 1700s and 1800s. And Panama is an established country. So I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not saying to do it. I'm just saying I don't really feel comfortable rolling into countries that we want this country. We're just going to take it because we can. Because we're the biggest military on the planet by orders of magnitude. We could do that to Guatemala, Nicaragua, Costa Rica. I mean, we take the whole place if we wanted to. But God, do we really want to?
No.
And so, I mean, we don't want to be that country. We don't want to be in a forever terrorist situation where now the El Salvadorans are fighting against us all the time, and we're dropping troops down there all the time. But bringing it closer into the U.S. orbit, that's a financial decision. It's probably a good strategic decision. Our ability to kind of control what's going on in our backyard. It's no different than I think the Russians wanting to control what goes on in Turkey, for example, right? Because that area there has a chokehold on their traffic out of the Black Sea. So if we were to say all of a sudden, yeah, we're going to, Turkey's going to be the 51st state, I think the Russians would go, whoa, time out. That we can't let that happen. But they're less effusive about their dislike for us to run Panama. Plus, we've been running Panama Canal since it was made, right? So it's not something new. And to your point, we don't really want to let the Chinese control it. Because, again, it's in our backyard. Right. So the same reason that they get so upset about Taiwan. It's right there in their backyard. Leave us alone, United States.
Yeah, and Dr. Botson says if we start rolling into countries because we can, it starts to look like the Soviets. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think the kinetic solution is going to be necessary at all. From some of the things I was hearing this weekend, and pardon me, I need to dig into it more. There are some really interesting ways that Trump appears to be using multinational countries to wrestle control away without going kinetic, which is brilliant, by the way. And I hope he, gives me hope, because again, we've talked about this before. The elements of national power are DIME: diplomacy, intelligence, military, and economics. So I think most lay people look at just the big M in that pie, that piece, and go, oh, there you go. But really, we've overused our military power. We really need to shrink the big M, because to Gordon Botson's point, it starts to really look ugly when we have, and this is what he's doing, I think, with trade, with tariffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's using this huge economic stick that we have to bend people to our will without ever a shot being fired.
Yeah. Let's face it, whether you like Mr. Trump or you don't like Mr. Trump, he's used to dealing with high-end, high-expense, high-finance deals, right? Throwing money around and using money as a lever is right in his wheelhouse. And we do have the biggest economy in the world by several orders of magnitude. Right? Even when our economy is doing poorly, it's like Mr. Musk, right? Oh, he lost $100 billion in Tesla stock value last week. That sucks. That's a lot of money. But it's not all his money, and he's still the richest man in the world by how much, right? It's funny because my wife and I were like talking about it. She's like, "Yeah, he lost a lot of money. $100 billion. That's significant money." I said, "Yeah, but honey, if somebody walked up to this table right now and gave us $500, I'd be like, hey, that's a lot of money. Look at me." It's all relative. But Mr. Trump knows how to do finance, right? He knows how to use. I mean, he's much more familiar with using economic means to make deals than he is to using the 82nd Airborne.
I tell you, Dr. Fuller, I cannot recommend enough his book, The Art of the Deal. I just finished it. Fantastic for understanding, like you said, where he's coming from. He has no problem using the courts, guile, deception. I mean, there's so many instances of him in there, like going before the zoning board in New York City and be like, I want to build this beautiful glass tower. This is what I want to build. You guys can stop me, but you cannot stop it if I build this thing. It'd be an ugly monstrosity, right? Like, there's not a damn thing you can do about it. I can build this ugly piece of shit tomorrow, and it's going to be an eyesore in the city. Or you can work with me, be my partner on building this. And here's how it's going to help you. It's going to bring in tourism. It's going to bring in this and that. And so his salesmanship and his ability to play these organizations, to use the courts and all, I had no idea that he was that good at a lot of these really Machiavellian things. So anyway, it's well worth your time.
And I it's on my list of things to read, along with 25% of the books you see behind me. But he knows how to do that sort of thing, and he's used to doing that sort of thing, and he's not above getting in there and wrestling around. So if he can add Greenland to our stable, I think it'd be great. Strategically, militarily, it's an awesome chunk of land. Good Lord, the things we could do with that versus what Denmark can do with that, vastly different. And oh, by the way, Denmark benefits. Okay, because the reason
Denmark's what, the size of New Jersey or something, Dr. Fuller?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a 5 million population. I mean, literally, I've lived in cities that have a higher population, which is, as an aside, always makes me laugh because people will always tell me, "Oh, we got to be more like Scandinavian countries and run our country like they do." I'm like, buddy, I've lived in towns with more people than Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
You can't possibly, I mean, New York City alone has more people than 2 or 3 of those Scandinavian countries combined. You can't compare what they do with what we do. It just, again, it's back to New York Yankees versus grade school T-ball, right? It's a whole different animal.
It's a issue of scale, in
Right.
some regards too. So these things don't necessarily scale up the way you want them to scale up.
And oh, by the way, a lot of these countries are able to do the social programs that they can do because they don't pay for their defense.
And they're homogenous countries. They don't have a lot of they've integrated some of the pluralism that we have, but until then they were very homogenous, and they thought and acted in a similar way because their cultures was such that they were ingrained over thousands of years, and people behave and act a certain way, and you can count on that when you create laws. Anyway, I digress.
No, it's a good point. I mean, Sweden now calls itself the rape capital of Europe.
Yeah,
because it lost its homogeneity of population, and they're paying a price for it. And Dr. Bodson says Greater Chicago is 8 million plus, right? So that's a whole Scandinavian country all by itself.
Yeah,
and so what we could do with the land and the space and the location of Greenland is phenomenal. And it's funny because I never would have thought, oh, let's go get Greenland and add that to the United States. Never occurred to me. Of course, I'm seeing media reports that all the people in Greenland are like, what, U.S. citizenship? Line us up. We're in.
Yeah. I get the blue passport.
Right. Ooh, and cable. Ooh, I'll get cable. So I can understand their position. And I think it'd be neat. It'd be akin to the Louisiana Purchase or the purchase of Alaska. Right?
But why is it so strategically significant? It didn't seem to be 60 years ago. Why is it only the strategic value of Greenland only ratcheting up, Dr. Fuller?
Well, obviously because of Chinese expansion, the Russians, it really puts us in a strong position to keep an eye on the Russians coming up there. And we don't want the Chinese to start building islands up there, which is a weird thing to say. It puts us in a great position, especially if it was a state. And I think it benefits the Europeans, right? Because right now we can just say Europe has European problems and we're out. And now we've got the whole Atlantic between them and us. Well, if we're in Greenland and Greenland is now a state, it puts us in a strong strategic position to help Europe if that needs to happen, but also to block expansionism, to prevent other countries from taking that island. It'd be a really great move for us, actually.
Yeah, we've talked about this. No, not a lot of downside. A whole lot of upside. Tremendous upside. If you really believe the climate change alarmists, then you have to see the strategic value of Greenland. You also need to recognize, as Dr. Fuller alluded to, that you have Russia and China moving in on that area because they see the writing on the wall. They realize that as Greenland melts, there's going to be a lot of fresh water flowing in and a lot of land all of a sudden appearing in Greenland. And Russia is building a lot of bases along their northern coast that weren't there before. And they're buying icebreakers. So there's something going on. I think it's only benefits everybody. I can't see a downside.
And God love the folks in England, but the way their politics are going and the way they're predicted to go over the next 50 years is alarming. And if England all of a sudden swaps sides or jumps ship in heaven forfend, that puts us on our back foot, right? Because we've depended on England for the better part of 200 years, and to lose that ally, even if they become neutral, it's tough for us. And having Greenland in our stable would vitiate against that. It's a good backup to my eye.
No, I completely agree with you. So we've talked about Panama, we talked about Canada, we talked about Greenland. Let's talk about Iran. Trump wrote a letter to Iran, and normally this would have been the other way around. Iran, I believe, would probably have written a letter to the incoming president expressing their wishes, but I think he got ahead of that curve. They have yet to respond to it, as I understand. I don't know that
interesting choice.
Yeah, I don't know that the context of that the letter has been made public. I certainly have not seen it. I don't know if you have, but what are your thoughts about that? I mean, one more thing on that. The Trump doctrine toward Iran seems to be, I don't remember who said it, whether it was Rubio or Hegseth or Trump himself, saying that whatever the Houthis do will be as if you did it.
That's saying the quiet part out loud, right?
Yeah.
Look, Iran has long wanted to be and has succeeded in becoming a regional power, right? They've been funding proxy wars in Israel, Syria, that whole general area for a long time, right? I mean, they had people fighting us in Iraq. They were funding operations in Afghanistan when I was there. They share a border with Afghanistan, so I get it. They want to be a regional power, and they've had designs on that for the last 45 years. And I think it sells, or at least it used to sell real well to their population, that the U.S. is the great Satan, because we were sponsors of the Shah. The Shah was a rather nasty little dude. So the public in Iran in the 80s was easy to say, hey, the reason we have so many problems here is because of the United States. Okay. I think that's becoming harder and harder to sell within their own borders. And they haven't let go of the idea of being a regional power and fighting against the United States. Now, what's always been funny to me is the Iranians are Persians. They're not Arabs. And that's a distinction that's fairly subtle to us here in the West. It is a big deal to people in the Middle East. And if you ever talk to Iranians, they're very dismissive of Arabs. They do not like Arabs, and they're very, very, very down on them. And, it's a lot like Mexicans and Puerto Ricans in my experience. There's a very distinct difference between the two, regions and populations, that perhaps if you're, from Wisconsin or, North Dakota or someplace, you don't really make that distinction as easily as they do, but they will not let you forget it.
Let me tell you something real quick. I did not know that, being an East Tennessean. So
then you join the Corps.
Yeah, then I joined the Marine Corps, right? And I'm exposed to this difference. But it wasn't a violent distinction. It was just there as part of the fabric of the platoon. And then I got a job as a bouncer at Club 108, and the Puerto Ricans hung out on one side of the dance floor, the Mexicans hung out on one side of the dance floor, and then one day somebody whipped out a Puerto Rican flag, man, and the fight was on. Here come the Mexicans out of nowhere. It's just like, what in the hell is going on?
Right.
So great distinction that you're making there, that these things are real to these people that live in that cultural divide.
And so Iran wants to be a regional power. To me, it reads a lot like the Japanese wanted to be a regional power. They wanted to be a world power, but they wanted their greater Asian co-prosperity sphere. But in their mind, they wanted to be at the top of that heap, right? They wanted to free all of their Asian brethren from white colonialism. Sounds good, sells well, right? It sounds like, okay, yeah. If you're in Bangkok or Malaysia, you're like, yeah, I'm getting tired of these Brits and these French and these Americans pushing me around. Let's be self-determinate. Let's get our own people in charge. I think the Iranians are kind of viewing things the same way. They want to have the Middle East for the Middle Easterners, which again sells well, but they want to be at the top of that heap, and they're willing to shoot you in the face to get there. Mm-hmm. And if you don't believe me, look at Lebanon, look at Syria, look at Yemen, right? Oman, Afghanistan. I mean, they're out there, and their actions aren't just getting Iranians killed. Mm-hmm. They're getting these other Arabs killed. Other Arabs are getting the Arabs killed as well as the Persians, and they're using them as proxies. They throw money at them because they have one of the stronger economies in the area. The only real counter to them economically are the Saudis. It's not like, and I guess Turkey to an extent. They share a border with Turkey. Mm-hmm. So the Iranians they're not going away. So how do you deal with them? Well, I guess you could do regime change, go in there and fight a war. And, do we want to go back to that part of the world we just spent 20 years getting out of it, and fight? And it would be a significant war. I mean, they fought the Iraqis to a standstill for 8 years that war went on?
Yeah, exactly.
And they could
would have children out there with the Quran praying and marching in front of the tanks. to just step on mines and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah.
going back to the mindset,
poison gas and the whole nine.
Right.
So,
yeah,
and arguably a nuclear power,
Mhm.
maybe not a nuclear high order nuclear detonation, but radiation disbursement devices where they're punching alphys and beta gamma waves at people. Yeah, they could do that.
100%.
And they've proven that they're willing to do that sort of thing. So
Mhm.
they're fairly intractable enemy. So do we want to invade? Can we invade? That's my personal opinion is I'd like to avoid it. But they're not going to go.
How do you deal with it if the stated position of the U.S. is you will never be allowed to get a nuclear device or the the enriched uranium it takes to have one, and we've shown that with Stuxnet, that the links we're willing to go to damage, Iranian centrifuges. Israel is certainly not ever going to allow that to happen at whatever the cost. So what should we be willing to do to stop that from happening? Is it something worth stopping?
Well, given their demonstrated lack of control on these issues and their willingness to arm proxies and point them at their enemies and fire them, I'd say, yeah, we should probably keep them out of the nuclear club as long as we possibly can, just like North Korea. But just having one tool in the toolbox is, I think, a mistake. So if your only tool is a hammer, everything's a nail, right? To your point earlier, if all we're willing to do is a military engagement and say you will not and you will, otherwise we will shoot you.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a one-trick pony. It's very unidimensional, and it only works if they're not willing to pay the price, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I don't want to get shot. Well, what if they're saying, no, okay, you can shoot me? Well, now your military, you're going to be forced to shoot them. Well, do we really want to do that? Maybe, maybe not. I think President Trump's approach is probably a pretty good one because he doesn't put the stick away.
Mm-hmm.
And he just kind of leans it against the wall. But there's also a carrot there, right? He's like, look, we can do these things for you, but we want to engage you, right? It's just like China. You can't push them out of the world economy completely. You just can't. They're going to find a way around it. Like the Iranians have been under U.S. sanctions for 46 years, something like that. Cuba, even longer. We're putting them up against the Chinese and the Russians. Well, what do those countries respond by doing? They make their own economy with each other.
Right.
So how about some economic engagement? How about some incentive? Say, look, let's talk. Let's work out. Let's put some diplomacy on the table. And let's talk with each other rather than shoot at each other. And President Trump's in a strong position because if you want to shoot at us, you're not going to win. Right? We'll glass all your cities if we have to. We'd rather not. It doesn't look good, but B-52 strikes are still pretty nasty. Or cruise missile strikes or whatever else we want to do. So yeah, that's on the table. We don't need to talk about that because it's there, we know it's there. But let's talk about what we can do. Let's talk about, look, you put down the nuclear option. And maybe we turn on this money or that money, or maybe we, and President Trump has done it before. Look, we'll have a staged progress. We're not just going to give you all your money back like previous administration did. Just flip the switch and you can take all the cash. We need to see demonstrations of trustworthiness, which I think is reasonable. I really do. It's just like your kids, right? Your kids screw up. You don't just automatically say, well, here you go. Here's a reward. No, you make them earn that trust back, right? I mean, anybody who's had children knows that you don't just willy-nilly throw things at them. You make them earn things if you want them to be good people. Same's true of Iran, North Korea. Everybody gets all upset. Oh, he's a Russian proxy. Trump is a Russian proxy. How about maybe he's just trying to stop people from killing each other? And the definition of a deal, right, as we talked about on the show before, is nobody walks away satisfied. Everybody walks away a little disappointed. I think that might be a good approach with the Iranians, at least a good starting position, right? Let's work towards a mutually acceptable solution here, because the other option is just bad. First thing we do is slip the leash on the Israelis, and they are just going to hammer the Jesus out of you.
And it's going to pull us into it because we're going to have to defend them when the Hezbollah and the Houthis and everybody, all their proxies go after them, and then Iran proper goes after them.
Right, and the Iranians are going to bring their allies in, right? So all of a sudden we're dodging Chinese surface-to-air missiles, Russian surface-to-air missiles. And look, at some point, we all got to get tired of shooting at each other, right? I mean, they're shooting at each other in Europe, shooting at each other all over in Syria for the last decade. Enough is enough. How about we at least start with a conversation?
Yeah, and I think to your point about, is this a worthy cause to be engaged in, and the cause being we can never let you get a nuclear weapon or the materials to have one. I would agree it is a worthy cause, and I pray that we exhaust every single one of the elements of national power prior to the military intervention, because that is going to destabilize that region in ways that we cannot appreciate from this, our cozy living rooms. So I don't want any part of it. However, I do agree that it cannot happen. What that looks like, I don't know. And I hope cooler heads prevail. And I go back to Trump didn't have a military when he was, cutting his teeth, making deals. He was able to use all these other things. And I pray that he does them. And that's why, I do have concerns because you brought up Russia, and let's talk about that briefly. I do have concerns of a kind of Neville Chamberlain appeasement with Russia. That does scare me. And of course, Tony says Russia was our allies in 2 world wars. I understand that. But at the same point of, if we cozy up to Russia and say, yeah, let them have Crimea, let them have the pieces that they've taken already. Come on, and oh, by the way, now you not only are you losing that mineral wealth in there, Ukraine, but you're also going to pay us back what little mineral things that you have that we want. You're going to pay us back that. It really puts them in a bad position. So I don't know what are your thoughts on that? Do you see the Neville Chamberlain piece?
Oh, it's absolutely a valid concern. It really is. And I like to think that appeasement isn't the approach. I was more concerned about the appeasement with the last crowd than I am with this crowd. Not because they appeased the Russians, but because they were appeasing the Iranians so much. So I think you need to be concerned about that. That being said, you need to incentivize the Russians to put down the guns, right? It's one thing to strong arm Zelensky and the Ukrainians into knocking it off. And I don't think you'd have to strong arm them much because the war is being fought on their territory. It's their people that are dying. It's their, property that's being destroyed. So I think convincing them to stop is a lot easier than convincing the Russians. But the truth of the matter is you can't just say, Russia, give up everything that you wanted in this battle, return to neutral corners, give the Ukrainians all their land back that you've bled for, whether your motivations were pure or not. You've bled for it. You're invested in it. There's a cost there for you. So in a bizarre way of looking at it, the Russians have kind of earned some of it. Yes, I agree that they invaded. They didn't, abide by international norms in doing so.
But we started this. And I hate to say that, like, there was agreements made and agreements not kept that NATO encroachment would not be what it is. So in some regard, we certainly created enabling conditions for him to do what he did. And I think we need to own that. And we have a tendency, we being NATO, the U.S., the Western powers, don't want to look at that. But it's a fact. And if we do allow him to keep that, there would have to be some sort of security guarantees for him. Like, look, we're not, we're not going any further.
Right. I don't like to blame the victim, but your point, I think, at its base is absolutely accurate. We allowed conditions to develop that push the Russians into a position where we, of course, don't think it's that big a deal. The Russians feel threatened. Because as NATO is pushed further and further east, it's put them in a position where they're like, hey, this is becoming an existential threat to us based on our history.
Well, you were an Army officer. You were a company commander. I mean, the idea of turning the map around and seeing the terrain through the enemy's eyes is so important. And I think the uneducated American or Westerner has a hard time doing that. Spin the map around. Would we find it acceptable what we're doing, what we did in Europe to the Russians? I mean, is Canada okay? Can we have Halifax, Nova Scotia, loaded up with missiles and Soviet tanks or what have you.
Yeah.
That's unacceptable.
Well, I mean, would we be okay with Canada being a part of the Warsaw Pact? For those of us
Hell
that
no.
have gray in our hair, look what we did over Cuba. They were trying to put some missiles in Cuba, and we almost went to war.
With an
Okay?
eyelash
And yet,
away.
at the same time, we had nuclear missiles in Turkey.
Yeah.
So,
But we're going to clutch our pearls.
right? Oh my God, I can't believe the Russians. Well,
Oh God, what have they done? So
right.
I agree. I don't want to blame the victim, but poor Ukrainians were caught in the middle of this. You know.
Yeah. And if you look at a map of Europe and you think, okay, in our lifetime, the border for the Russians was halfway through Germany.
Right.
Right. I mean, the Czechoslovakia, a whole country of Czechoslovakia, right? All of Yugoslavia. That was sort of their western border, and now it's pushed up. What, Belarus, I guess, is still in their pocket. The Ukraine was looking to be, was aligning itself closer and closer to the West and was trying to become a NATO ally. They've lost Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. They're all in NATO now, right? So that border, if you look at a map, it's gone, 1,000 miles east? That's all terrain that puts a potential threat from the Russian perspective that much closer to Moscow. And given the history that they've lived through and living experience, granted it's aging out and it's almost gone, that's a serious thing for them. That's a very serious thing for them. We wouldn't put up with Mexico becoming a Warsaw Pact nation. We wouldn't put up with Panama, Guatemala, Nicaragua becoming Warsaw Pact. We got involved in Nicaragua back in the 80s and 90s when they started going communist.
That's what I was talking about. The Monroe Doctrine. Anything happens in the Western Hemisphere is ours. Well, what if Russia said that?
Right. Well, apparently we're not okay with that. But I find that rather hypocritical, and I don't want necessarily to go to war with a country like Russia over hypocrisy.
No,
because the Russians, they couldn't stand against France, Germany, and Poland, let alone France, Germany, Poland, and England. If they went to war, they certainly couldn't stand against us, short of throwing nukes.
Yeah,
that's really the only option they would have if we got into a war with them. Well, let's not do that then, right? I don't want to see nukes arcing back and forth over the planet. I don't think anybody does. But we're going to put the Russians in a position where they feel like that's their only option. So if we guarantee, and by the way, we've guaranteed before that the Ukraine would not become a NATO country. So we've got to put in place things that say, look, they can't become part of NATO. Now, do they become part of the European Union economically? I don't know. That's not our problem. But it's going to be a concern for the Russians.
Is there a military entanglement that also comes with being an EU membership? I would imagine there is, but I don't know.
I would imagine so also. I mean, just the economics alone would dictate that. And they have, they've developed fighters and whatnot, European Union fighters and what have you. So I think so, but I don't know. I certainly don't know well enough to say it emphatically one way or the other to your audience. But I can understand the Russian position because, like you said, you got to flip the map around. You got to look at it from the other guy's point of view and the other guy's perspective. So, and has Romania gone to NATO? I don't even know. But and look, a lot of these countries they didn't want to be under the Russian heel for as long as they were, and there's no money in it anymore. Right? I mean, that's a big perception for a lot of these people. Look, where's the money? The money is being allied with the West, right? Because then our trade works well, and they have a lot of countries we can trade with, and we can make a lot of money. Or we're aligned with the Russians, and we can't make a lot of money. So there's fiscal motivators there as well. But as far as Ukraine goes, I think it's safe to say that everybody wants that to stop. Everybody does. And I think President Trump, only Nixon could go to China, right? President Trump, I think, is in a much stronger position to help negotiate a ceasefire and ultimately an end to that war than President Biden was, just because of who they are.
Yeah, I think the ineptitude of Russia was something and it really showed the flaws in their mobile infantry doctrine, that we were worried about them cruising through the Volga Gap with all this. We just showed that is not going to happen, whether it's the Javelin or the TOW or A-10s. I mean, if A-10s would have got on that in the Ukrainian battlefield, it would have been a rout quick. So I'm not very worried about them, but at the same time, we don't need to have them as an enemy. It doesn't make any sense. We have other problems, whether it's China or Iran. And to speak of China, if you haven't seen these giant things that they're building, these giant pontoons, they're bigger than an aircraft carrier. It's startling, and I can only think of one reason that they're creating these giant. If you haven't looked it up, Dr. Fuller, I encourage everybody.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
Are they barges? Are they landing craft, or what are they?
Yeah, imagine. Go ahead and Google it if you can. Just to wrap your head around it. These giant, they're bigger than an aircraft carrier, and it's making like a highway. And it's like, okay, wow, that's your plan to get Taiwan, is to create this giant thing.
Giant Bailey Bridge.
You see it?
Not yet. No.
Okay. I mean, it's a sitting duck for any kind of munition that you can think of. So sure. I think it's pretty silly, but that just shows their commitment to ultimately get Taiwan. And of course, they don't want Taiwan for Taiwan. They want Taiwan because it's TSMC and all the other goodies that they get with it. Speaking of goodies, let's talk about Tesla, Dr. Fuller.
Tesla.
Now, if we classify these leftists, these violent leftists that are burning and attacking Tesla owners and dealerships and things of this nature as domestic terrorists, what is to stop this administration from sending them to prisons in El Salvador?
Wow, that's a quite a leap. Well, first of all, classifying them as a domestic terrorist, there's no domestic terrorist statute in the federal system. You cannot be convicted of domestic terrorism.
Really?
At least right now. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. There's just not a statute that says domestic. It's a label is all it is at this point, federally speaking.
So wait a minute, maybe make sure I understand this. So is a terrorist kind of thing?
Well, there's a federal definition of terrorist, and they have international terrorism. But
let me take it one step further then, that you put your FBI hat on. If we have labeled Trinidad or however you pronounce that, as terrorist organization, does that mean anything we do to them falls under whatever statute is out there?
They're a foreign terrorist operation.
Okay,
that's the difference. So yeah, they're foreign. So you can put them under the Foreign Enemies Act or whatever that was called, and you can address it that way. Look, what are these people doing so far? They're vandalizing, cars. They're vandalizing Mr. Musk's dealerships.
And they're virtue signaling.
And they're violence. Right. So, calling them domestic terrorists, I get it. He's a political ally. You want to come to his aid. You want to, whether people like Mr. Musk or not, what he's doing or not. I understand why Pam Bondi would come out and say, well, as the Attorney General of the United States, I think these people are domestic terrorists. Okay, you can say all these things, but then I watch your actions afterwards. And frankly, look, they haven't killed anybody that I'm aware of, right? Mm-hmm. They're acting like assholes. They're acting like spoiled children. Okay, we can all agree on that. There are plenty of laws out there to deal with these people thus far, right? There are existing laws at the state and federal or state and local level that can address it, right? Arson, mm-hmm. They're burning things down, to Mr. Leonard's point. Absolutely. I saw a picture yesterday of a college professor out of Michigan keying one as he walked by at an airport parking lot. To me, that's childish. What are you doing? You're a grown man. You're keying somebody's car. Knock it off. You're a rent-a-mob leftist that hasn't gotten to do anything for 4 years while Biden was in office, and now you get a chance to go out and vent your rage on a socially acceptable target. Okay. Do they need to? Yeah, Dr. Botson says they haven't killed anyone yet. Yeah, that's true. But when they do, then you prosecute them for murder. Right now, prosecute them for vandalism. I'm all for going after them and getting them. Okay, you threw a firebomb. Great, you're going to prison.
But if there is some, and this is where I was going with that Trinidad, however you pronounce it, this Venezuelan group and MS-13 that have been foreign terrorists, then if there is an underlying network, call it the Weatherman 2.0, then I would love to see RICO and all the other instruments of government power come crashing down on that organization and round them all up.
Right. But as far as putting them in El Salvador, no, you're not going to do that. They're U.S. citizens. So unless you change the laws, and I guess you can start extraditing U.S. citizens to foreign prisons. I guess that could happen.
What about
I think
Gitmo?
you'd be tied up in court forever.
Gitmo.
I understand it's open. But look, so far they're childish punks, and I think they should be addressed as such. There are plenty of laws on the books that you can go and snag them. And look, if you've got some overarching Moriarty type that's, puppet mastering things between states, as soon as they're crossing state lines, they become a federal problem. Mm-hmm. And then you can address them, like you said, with RICO or any of the other statutes at the federal level that need to go after those parts.
But Mark says they're doing it in Canada as well, Dr. Fuller. So they're obviously crossing state lines.
Right. But are they crossing state lines as an organized system, or are they is this just a rent-a-mob? This is a flash mob, right? Right now, the enemy of the day is Elon Musk. Yay, everybody's on it. Rush Limbaugh called it the rent-a-mob, right? These just people that are constantly upset about whatever they're told to be upset about. Look, 6 months ago, nobody had told them go throw things at Elon Musk's Teslas. 6 months ago, driving a Tesla was a virtue signal.
Absolutely.
Right. My neighborhood is full of Tesla cars. Mm-hmm. Right. And to my knowledge, there's nobody that voted for Trump driving one. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't know any.
I'm not saying that should be some sort of a political litmus test, but all of a sudden they've decided, well, we're going to start burning Musk's. And I'm assuming it's because Musk has been in Doge, and Doge is cutting funding, and he's working for Trump, and Trump is getting rid of the Department of Education, and now we're all pissed off.
Glad you started pulling that thread, because that is the thing. Like, why are they so angry at Musk? Oh, because Musk is part of Doge, and Doge is cutting things that everybody should be, things that Obama wanted to do, things that Clinton and Gore tried to do. He's finally doing it, and the left is having a conniption fit, as we call it here in the South. But I agree with Dr. Bodson here. A nice Supermax in Colorado would be a beautiful place to see some of these people taken. And I secretly I love the El Salvadorian model of, you get brought in, we shave your freaking head. This is not a picnic, you don't get the juice machine. We watch Ricky Lake reruns all day long. And, no, it's going to be hell for you until you breathe your last breath. And hopefully that is very soon. So, yeah, and we have to make the cost of vandalizing these things incredibly high. And you only have to do it to a few people, and everybody else is going to get in line, I think.
Yeah. And Alan Kelly says most damage is classified as felony for the amount of damages. If convicted, there is that felony millstone around their neck. Now, I'm going to draw a parallel here that may not, people may not like. But there were folks that said that domestic terrorism was rampant on January 6th. And those people should be classified as domestic terrorists and prosecuted and hammered. And they were. I mean,
and that administration did that. They brought every element of government power down on them to hunt.
They did. And people on the right side of the fence, as opposed to the left, not opposed to the wrong, but on the right side of the fence, were incensed. Like, no, they were vandals, they were assholes, they were trespassers, but domestic terrorists is too much. And what happened? Trump used it as a pillar in his platform, a plank in his platform, got elected, and the first thing he did was what? Pardoned all of them, and including people that, in my mind, should not have been pardoned.
Yeah, agree.
I mean, absolutely should have spent years in prison.
Yeah. If you attack cops, if you damage property, man, if you walked through there and waved your flag and walked out the other side, do you need to pick up trash in your city for 40 hours? Maybe, but do you deserve to rot in a federal prison forever? No.
Right. So he comes in and pardons them. So, hey, folks, guess what you can expect if all of these people that are attacking the Tesla dealerships, if suddenly they are found guilty under some overarching federal statute, I would say you could probably expect that the next Democrat that steps into the Oval Office, the first thing they're going to do is pardon anybody that attacked a Tesla dealership that was convicted under a federal charge.
Yeah.
So I say that to say you really ought to go after them with state and local, because the next president can't pardon them. And if you say the governor of Wisconsin or Michigan or someplace goes high left, and decides to pardon. Well, that doesn't let them all loose, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't let every one of them out the door. So go get them under state law. And oh, by the way, you can be more granular in your approach so that the guy that just keyed the car is paying a fine and picking up trash for a couple of weekends. The guy that burned down a Tesla dealership and caused $4.5 million worth of damage is doing a longer bit.
Mhm.
So to me, right now, today, the best way to address it is to just crush them with state and local prosecutions.
But the Biden administration did. They went after the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, Patriotic Front. I mean, you name any organization that was a right-leaning organization that had a member anywhere near DC was gone after. So the precedent thing is already set, in my opinion. Yeah.
But you also, and my point to this is yes, the precedent is set, but it didn't work out as well as they thought it was going to work. I guess, it didn't work.
Pendulum swing.
Right. Yeah. And so there's no reason that we shouldn't plan on that swing going the other way at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a student of history and as somebody who's been awake for the last couple of years, that pendulum's going to swing back the other way.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be another Democrat in the Oval Office at some point. And when that happens,
I think we're going to see Musk unleash his resources on some of these people. And I don't mean, with laws, I mean with lawsuits. Somebody called him a Nazi, and he's like, he's a lawsuit inbound was what he posted on X. Here it comes. You just poked the bear, and I'm going to come after you with everything I got for slander or whatever charge I'm sure he'll come up with. And he absolutely should.
I've applauded the police officers that have gone after people that have slandered them and he's a baby killer, or he's a this or he's a that. I love it when the cops sue, because too often people misbehave in polite society and there's no repercussion.
Yep.
They make false accusations and there's no repercussion. And in extreme cases, you see state prosecutors with malicious, unfounded prosecutions, and there's no repercussion. So when something like this happens, okay, you came and you burned down my, a Tesla dealership, and you called me a Nazi. Well, normally, a guy like Musk just, okay, well, I'm insured, no big deal. You think I'm a Nazi, I don't give a shit what you think, whatever. Mm-hmm. But I love the idea that, look, you're poking the richest man on the planet. He can throw $1 million at you to take everything you're ever going to own. Absolutely. And now you're going to have to write him a check till the day you die. Every month, you're cutting a check. And, oh, by the way, he owns your house now. And you're never going to own a car because you're going to be taking public transport. Mm-hmm. Well, okay. I don't expect Mr. Musk to sue me because I'm not calling him names and I'm not throwing bombs into his dealerships.
Right.
You want to live in polite society, behave politely.
Yeah. And if you don't, there are consequences for that. And
there should be. Again, I'm coming from where I spent my lifetime. That shouldn't be a surprise that I think there should be consequences for bad behavior.
As do I. Dr. Fuller, I kept you on here for 1 hour and 42 minutes, man. As always, I love just taking you on a ride every Monday. Any closing thoughts? Anything I didn't bring up? We talked about Kash Patel, Greenland, Panama, Canada, the Obama. We even talked about Michelle and Barack potential divorce. For those that missed it, go back and watch the beginning of that. Removing clearances, Iran. And then we kind of finished up with the Tesla mess that's going on. Anything that we didn't discuss that you think we should be thinking about?
Well, there's always going to be more. There'll be more in the next week. So I wouldn't open it up to that at this point in the show, at least. I would say, we're all very good at looking hard at the left and what they do on the left. I think we need to do it on the right as well. And it's not a matter of saying, I don't like this guy or I don't like that guy. I just don't agree with everything they do. And I say that this is important for us as members of the American Warrior Society, because you have to have a clear and as close to objective viewpoint as possible in order to properly prepare for the potential threats that are coming down the pike. Mm-hmm. And if you are very deluded with your perceptions and you only believe the right or you only believe the left, it's my argument that you're putting yourself in a position that's less advantageous than having a good, clear idea of what's going on and where you stand on it. And blind allegiance and blind faith in the left or the right is not the right prescription.
Mhm.
So I hope nobody perceives the fact that I disagree with certain aspects of both parties and the way they comport themselves as anything other than an American disagreeing and agreeing with various facets of policy. And I think that your audience knows that. I just think it's worth saying every now and then, just so to make sure we continue to steer the boat in the right direction. Because as we say here all the time, Rich, that fight is coming. Knowing what's going on is part of being ready.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think it's the 11 leadership traits and or principles, I'm sorry, that the Marine Corps has. And one of the first one is know yourself and seek self-improvement. And I know my psychological makeup is such that, can y'all hear the wolfhounds going crazy? I can lean to authoritarian, and I would have no problem with, you can't pardon dead people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
2,000
Yeah.
people nailed to crosses along the Appian Way don't get clemency by the next incoming administration. So
That's true.
I know that I have to guard against that. So I love the fact that you say that, because it's like, you need to open your aperture. Don't get too close-minded here. This current regime can go in ways that we don't want it to. But Don says, thanks for the show, gents. Great job again. Mark says, appreciate you too. Have a great day. Tony gives us a thumbs up. And with that said, Dr. Fuller, thank you so much. And Will is still out next Monday, so hopefully we can pressure Dr. Fuller to come back next Monday as well. We'll see how his schedule goes.
Absolutely, Rich. I look forward to it. I always enjoy talking to you and interacting with your audience. You're great folks. And if I have the availability next Monday, I'm at your disposal.
Well, thank you, Dr. Fuller. And if you will take us out, sir.
Well, as I already said, folks, that fight is coming. However you define it, be ready.